Let's see how the nurses resolve this ethical issue. Thanks everyone. I'm Laura and I am the nurse manager here on the psych ward of St. Paul's Hospital. My role here is to help develop and mediate the ethical issues that do come up. I will also be facilitating the discussion today. We will be using the decision-making tree to help us guide in our decision on what to do with this situation. So first, I would like to gather all the background information of what happened. So I did talk to Sarb and this is what she said. Hi Sarb, my name is Laura and I am the manager at the psych unit at St. Paul's. I'm just here to ask you about what happened between you and the nurses Cleo while you were at our unit. We just want to work out a solution that works out for both of us.
Okay, well Cleo, the nurse, she came into my room and she started grabbing my wrist. I didn't know what she was doing because she just introduced herself and grabbed my wrist, so I told her I let go and insisted that she leave my room, and then she kind of got upset and she said and started questioning why she should leave my room. I said I didn't appreciate that you touched me like that, I just insisted that she leave.
Okay, Sarb, I understand that you seemed like you felt kind of uncomfortable and wasn't really sure what Cleo was doing at that time.
Yeah, and I felt really scared and violated. I just wanted her to leave my room.
And so that is why I'm here as a nurse manager. I want to ensure that patients, including yourself, you feel safe while being on the unit. So which means talking to you, other patients, and of course the nurses. It's also my job to make sure that the nurses are following their practice and ethical standards. I hope that we can resolve this together. So now that we're aware of Sarb's side, I would like Cleo to share what happened.
Well, on the morning of June 2nd, I was doing my morning rounds and I went to greet all my patients. I walked into Sar's room and introduced myself as a nurse working with her that day. I wanted to do my vital signs, so I asked if I could do her radial pulse first, and she nodded and extended her wrist to me. And as I put my hand on her wrist, she pulled it away very quickly and asked me to leave. I was unsure of what just happened, so I decided to give her some time and come back later to do her radial pulse.
Thank you, Cleo, from your point of view. I also know that you've been working here for 20 years and I've never heard of a client complaint. Was there anything different about that day, though?
No, I don't think so. It just seemed like any other regular day.
Now that we gathered all the background information, we do need to identify where the problem is an ethical issue. Mary, do you have any experiences with these kinds of situations that can kind of help us guide us through this?
It seems like you guys have a very tough case on your hands. From my experience, an ethical issue is knowing from right and wrong and choosing the right course of action. It seems as if ethical issue or focus is the focus for today's discussion, and as stated in the practice guidelines, ethical violations from perspectives of the patient. This refers to actions or failures to act that breach fundamental duties to the persons receiving care or to the colleagues or other healthcare professionals. So it sounded like Sarb felt like Cleo breached the fundamental rights of informed consent. So from Sarb's perspective, this event is an ethical issue. However, from Cleo's perspective, she felt that she gained informed consent and therefore it is not an ethical issue.
Alright guys, so now let's delve into this problem and see whether or not we can identify if Cleo followed or breached any practice standards. So the first thing that comes to mind is the practice standard of boundaries in the nurse-client relationship. It states that the nurse-client relationship is therapeutic and it focuses on the needs of the client. It is based on trust, respect, and professional intimacy, and it does require the appropriate use of the authority the nurse holds. Another practice standard that does come to mind, of course, is informed consent, in which consent is the voluntary agreement to some act or purpose made by the capable individual. Nurses have both legal and ethical obligations regarding consent for any type of care, treatment, and even research. So the conditions for consent do include that the client or the substitute decision maker has been adequately informed. Also, the client must be able to give or refuse the consent. And lastly, there must be no fraud or misrepresentation.
So from Cleo's perspective, She respectfully informed the client of her title before touching or hugging the patient. Nurses are supposed to determine if the contact is appropriate, supported, and welcomed by the client. Therefore, by informing the client, Cleo did not break any violations or rules or boundaries. Cleo asked for consent, as evidenced by the patient extending her wrist.
Okay, so what about the patient's point of view? Did the nurse violate any ethical rights?
Well, from Sarb's point of view, Cleo did violate both practice standards of boundaries and informed consent. According to the CRNBC practice standards of boundaries, the nurse-client relationship is supposed to be based on trust, respect, and professional intimacy. However, from the patient's point of view, the nurse did indeed cross those lines and did not respect the patient's boundaries, and she felt uncomfortable with the nurse's actions. Furthermore, the patient also felt that the nurse violated the practice standards of informed consent by not asking her permission to touch her.
I see, so what are other things that we should consider then?
We have to identify the stakeholders in this event.
So what we have here are some major concerns, and we do have various stakeholders in this incident. So this includes SARB, who represents the clients that will continue to be important when assessing the quality of care of the unit. Another key stakeholder will include myself and the other nurses working on the unit who always look to continue to improve their clinical practice. So we want to make sure that we address the needs of those involved. I will now discuss some solutions to this ethical situation. And so after consideration of all the background information, the practice and ethical standards, also identifying the key stakeholders, I believe that Cleo is innocent. This is because upon further investigation, I reread the patient's chart and discovered that SARB had a psychiatric assessment done by the psychiatrist that deemed her incompetent. Regardless of Cleo or SARB was right or wrong, I think we have learned a valuable lesson from this situation. So does anyone else have any suggestions for resolution?
Well, I think it is important that we obtain a baseline cognitive assessment and continually reassess to ensure that the clients are competent and can give informed consent. So being aware and knowing SARB's mental status at that time would have been one of the first steps to developing a resolution.
That sounds realistic and a workable process that can be implemented on the unit.
So what else can we do to prevent any type of ethical violations or situations that could occur on the unit in the near future?
I believe that as nurses, we need to continually remind ourselves to obtain informed consent during all care and ensure that clients are aware of what is going on. Informed consent is a very important, and sometimes I think we forget that obtaining it is a part of our everyday jobs.
Also, to protect the nurses, or they are unsure of the client's level of cognition, they can bring in a second nurse in the room to just assist the nursing care and have a second person there just as backup, and the second nurse may act as a witness, and also promoting a higher level of nursing care, because the primary nurse is held to a higher standard of accountability. This not only protects the unit, it also protects the client.
That sounds like a great idea. I think we can also implement some type of ethical training where nurses continually work towards better identifying ethical situations before they happen, and then take the appropriate actions if a situation actually arises. So how does everyone feel about these suggestions?
Sounds very reasonable.
I think having that ongoing training will benefit all the nurses, new and experienced, and will positively affect our client care.
All right, thanks everyone for coming in today and helping work towards a really reasonable solution.
In conclusion, Cleo the RN was not fired and returned back to work and became a leader in educating other RNs about patient care and informed consent. SARB, the patient, dropped all threats of suing Cleo for sexual misconduct and reporting to the media, and she felt that her voice was heard, and after discussing with the nurse manager, she felt satisfied with her care.
So now let's see how Cleo should have handled the situation.
Good
Good morning, SAR. My name's Cleo. I'm a student nurse today. Can I take your pulse?
What are you doing? Leave the room! You can't touch me like that! Go! Go!
In summary, the concepts we explore today include morality, ethics, ethical violations, the nurse-client relationship, and informed consent. Within the nurse-client relationship, it is crucial to get informed consent from the patient before performing any tasks or providing care. If an ethical violation does arise, it is important to follow the steps of a decision-making framework. The one we used today was Rodney's ethical decision-making model, in which the steps include to A. Gather background information. B. Identify whether the problem is an ethical issue. C. Identify key stakeholders. D. Identify possible courses of action. E. Reconcile the facts of the case with relevant principles. And F. A resolution. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the video.